I'm going to hand over now to James from CEIS, who is going to take us through a little bit of the background and where this has come from and why we're proud of where we've got to and excited about what comes next.
Thank you, Beth. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. For those who don't know me, my name is James Finney. I work for Community Enterprise in Scotland, CEIS, based in Glasgow. And I've been working in the third sector for 17 years now, which doesn't seem so long. Alongside SCVO, CEIS has been involved in the development of the new resources that you will see today. And I will explain a little bit later about the other partners who have been involved in that process also. Really just wanted to take some time at the start of today's webinar to give a little bit of context and explain about the work that's been done over the last couple of years to actually get to this stage. The background to why we felt it necessary to come together to support the third sector in Scotland to take action on net zero is actually found in specific research that's been done over the last few years. In August 2021, SCVO and Senscott published a survey of 549 respondents, which was entitled Third Sector and Net Zero. And really that was a survey that was designed to take the temperature of the third sector in Scotland in regards to its readiness to move towards net zero. One of the key findings from that was that 80% of the respondents, of the nearly 550 respondents, hadn't actually set any carbon reduction targets. So that was in 2021. And then earlier this year, the Social Enterprise Survey census, which was the 2021 census published earlier this year. And that found that 51% of nearly 800 respondents said that they were either not so well or not at all prepared to take the transition to net zero. So both of those pieces of work indicated to us that as much as the sector recognised there is a climate emergency, the fact that actually its state of readiness to respond to that needed support, resources and tools to help them to do that. So what we basically did as part of that group was we then conducted 3 months of research to say, well, if we know that the sector requires support, what are the solutions that are out there today to be able to deliver that support? We identified 54 individual service providing solutions that were already in the market and available to third sector organisations. And we started to look at each of those in a bit of detail, looking at did they or would they provide the solutions that the third sector required. What we found is there was not one solution, not one off-the-shelf solution that was going to give us what we felt our research indicated we needed. And that was tools, resources and support that was going to be clear, simple, relatable, allowing organisations to progress at their own pace, no matter the starting point that they came from, no matter the size, the knowledge, the resources that they had. And it was going to be cost effective as well. So we looked at those criteria and we said we couldn't find any solutions that gave us that off-the-shelf solution. However, what we did find was 2 solutions that we felt were really, really strong, and that by working with them, that could really, by bringing them together, that was going to give us a solution that we felt was really going to be a powerful one for the third sector in Scotland. I'm delighted to say that we're joined today by Carol and Adam from Going Greener Together and Small 99, the 2 service providers that have now been involved in working significantly with us to deliver the solutions we'll show you today. So with that context of research and knowing the importance for the sector to have a positive response to the climate emergency, we decided to come together as a collective of support organisations, intermediary bodies and agencies. And we formed a steering group, and it involves 12 national bodies, and that is represented by Community Enterprise in Scotland, the organisation that I work for, SCVO, Circular Community Scotland, Community Enterprise, the Development Trust Association Scotland, First Port, Social Enterprise Scotland, Social Investment Scotland, Voluntary Action North Lanarkshire that represents each of the 32 TSIs, Scottish Communities Climate Action Network, or SCAN, Scottish Community Alliance, and Scottish Communities Finance. So a very, very broad church of the third sector in Scotland. And really what's happened is that over the last 2 years, we've worked collectively and collaboratively together to be able to deliver the solutions that we're about to demonstrate to you today. Further to this, the work is also being supported by the Scottish Government financially and South Lanarkshire Council, for whom we give our thanks for supporting its development. And lastly, we've had ongoing dialogue with Scotland's Funders Forum, and a number of the Scotland Funders Forum representatives are here today. And that represents many of the leading statutory bodies and independent grant giving trusts that support the third sector in Scotland. And we continue that work with them, and really with the vision that the solution that we show today is a solution for the sector as a whole, whereby intermediary organisations, third sector organisations themselves, and funders can adopt that single solution to supporting the sector to deliver a response, a positive response to the climate emergency in Scotland today. So that's hopefully a little bit of context about the background in the last 2 years. And what I'd now like to do is hand over to Katrina from Inspiring Scotland, who'll take you on to the next stage. Katrina.
Thanks, James. And hello, everyone. It's really nice to see so many of you on the call today. I'm really pleased that you've been able to join us, and it's such a great opportunity to learn more about this amazing new resource. So you will be hearing from me a little bit later on about the funding and support side of things. But we thought we'd kick off today with a bit of an opportunity to find out more about who else is in the room, and also, you know, get a bit involved yourselves. So this is a tool called Menti, or Mentimeter. Some of you might be familiar with it already, some of you might not. It's an opportunity to kind of have a log on. So you go to www.menti.com, either on a new tab on your whatever device you're using, or your phone if you've got one handy. And then you enter the code 78590329. And over the next 5 minutes or so, I'm going to take us through some nice, easy, but hopefully, dare I say it, a little bit fun questions that are all around the topics that the Growing Climate Confidence resource seeks to support. So I can see 16 of you have already got on to Menti. So that's a little thumb in the corner of the screen that's kind of coming up. That's what people are clicking on when they get in. So that's fantastic. Numbers are racking up. If you're having technical problems today, if it's just not a good day for you, if you don't have a device that you can use, don't worry about it. You get to be the viewer and see everyone's ideas kind of coming up on screen. And if you have anything that you want to add after the session, I'm sure that the team organizing today will be pleased to hear it. So we have 40 people already kind of logging on. That's great. The code of how to join will be hopefully stay at the top of the screen for the next few minutes. So if you are still kind of whirling away how to do it, it should be there. But otherwise, let's get started. So hopefully a nice, easy one. Where are you joining us from today? Now, typically people put in the name of the city, town, or village they are in. I am also willing to accept answers like, I'm in my back garden, I'm in the beer garden of the local pub, I'm looking after my next door neighbour's dog. All different answers are acceptable as well. Sunny Paisley, I like, that's great. Good to know that there's a bit of, I'm in Edinburgh today, so I like to hear that it's sunny on the west coast. A very hot spare bedroom. Yeah, I've been hearing from people saying working downstairs, basements, cold spaces are kind of the desirable locations. Gorgeous Edinburgh, Campbelltown, we've got Shetland, office in Dundee. Right, we're all over the place. I think I saw a Dumfries somewhere as well. So that means we're kind of from southwest to northeast. So that's pretty good coverage. Fantastic. Give you another few seconds just for anyone, any extra additions. Conservatory. I hope everyone's wearing, everyone who's in sunny spots is wearing suntan lotion. That's an essential. But it looks like the majority of us are coming from Glasgow today. So I hope that you all get to enjoy it later on. Costa del Air, fantastic. Great. Okay, so on to the next question. Have you used the Growing Climate Confidence resource yet? So, you know, it's a new resource. It's been out for a couple of weeks. You might have had a chance, you might have had a look when you registered for today's session, or you were maybe like, look, I'm going to sit back, I'm going to wait till the launch event. I don't want to spoil it myself. So I see that's where the majority of people are. So there were a few keen beans who've got so far as to get on the resource and on the scorecard. That's fantastic. I will put myself in that category. And yeah, some people who are kind of in the middle, who've browsed the website, but they haven't got full into the scorecard yet. So you've got a little bit of opportunity to go. But I'm glad to see that so many of you are here for the first time, and that's fantastic. Okay, on to the next question. So this is about your confidence. Obviously, the tool is called the Growing Climate Confidence Resource, and that's ultimately what you want to grow over the course of you using the resource. So this is about ranking yourself on a scale of, I think, 0 to 5, with 0 being you're not at all confident, you don't know where to start, maybe it kind of scares you a little bit, the concept of climate action. And number 5 being, I'm an expert, I know what I'm doing. Maybe your charity or organization has something to do with climate change explicitly, and you've been working in this area for a time. You're just getting a read of where people are at. And what you see on the screen is a kind of average of everyone's scores. So 2.7 means that we probably have some people higher, some people lower, but in terms of where we are as a group, we're kind of slightly higher than the average, I would say. You can see the scores coming in, we're kind of hovering around the 2.7, 2.8, so that's really good. And you can see that we have maybe a few more in the not at all confident newbies, I would say, at the beginning, and then quite a lot of people in the middle who are maybe wouldn't feel confident calling themselves an expert, but yet there's still opportunity to grow. Thank you very much for that. And our next question, this one is a little bit about why you are here today and why you're interested in taking climate action. So you'll see there's kind of 5 different options, and it's a little bit of a different type of question. We want to encourage you to rank your scores. So maybe as an organization, what is kind of most important to you? Is it that it's part of your mission as an organization, you've been working on this for a while? Is it because the funders asked you to do it and that's why you've kind of started doing it? So you don't have to have an answer from 1 to 5. I encourage you to do so if you can. But what we're trying to find out is what's the biggest driver for people who are wanting to use this tool and kind of get involved in climate action more broadly. So you can see the results coming in. Well, there's a bit of a race for first place between it being important to the people and to the communities that you support and it being part of your organization's mission. It's really interesting. Oh, we've got another one taking the lead. And it's interesting to see that it's whether the fact that you've committed to net zero targets is maybe further down the list, maybe you haven't committed to net zero targets at all. And also that you're not really hearing that demand from your funders at the moment. I think we're maybe settling into some scores now, so quite a good spread across the board. I've seen results like this where one thing totally wins, nothing else gets a look in. So it's yeah, it's great to see that there's kind of a good spread of different motivations that people are getting involved in. And I'm just seeing Wendy's comment about you feel that there should be another option about why it's important because of the need for the planet, young people. So I think I would come into saying, you know, what is that because it's important to your staff and board, or is it important to the people that you support? Often those are sometimes one and the same as well. So maybe options 2 or 3 would kind of fit in. Okay, great, thank you. And then one final question, this is free text, you can say whatever is kind of actions that you have done. Is there anything that any actions that you've taken already? And these could be kind of small things, like maybe you've changed some internal policies about how you work. Maybe you've supported a cycle to work scheme in your organization. Maybe you've audited your building to find the biggest changes that you can make, maybe particularly around energy or waste or water. Loads of different things. So it's really, this is my favorite bit of any kind of exercise like this, where you kind of hear what people are saying directly. So lots of stuff around environmental policy, travel policy that encourages public transport use. That's a great one. Working from home, save fuel costs. Establishing a green team about getting that internal support to move things forward. That's amazing. Training to increase your knowledge around climate change and what your organization can do. That's fantastic, and often the keystone of a lot of kind of climate action work. And I think you see that kind of coming through the Growing Climate Confidence resource as well. Flexible and remote working policy. green plan for your building, funded a number of net zero projects, including solar PV, batteries, EV chargers, so really helping to build that energy infrastructure that helps us reduce our emissions, become more energy resilient. LFS statement, so learning for sustainability statement for climate action for young people. Resources for youth workers. So again, I'm imagining that's maybe coming from a charity that's directly supporting the young people. And I think that's a really good example of how you can blend what your organization is doing on an ongoing basis, day to day, working with youth workers, and then thinking about how climate action combines with that. So resources for those youth workers. So we've got 35 responses so far. Yes, I think that's encouraging. But we'll maybe leave it there for today. I think I'm passing on to Carol. But thank you all so much for your contributions on Menti.
Hello everybody. I'm Carol Botton. I'm the Chief Executive at VON, and Beth has asked me to come along today to talk very quickly about Going Green Together and what we learned. So very similar to what James was saying, we are the infrastructure organisation for the Northeast region in England, so like SCVO, but just for the Northeast of England. We wanted to do some work around supporting the sector with environmental sustainability and responding to the climate emergency, and went and had a look, like your gang did, and couldn't find anything that was relevant for the sector. And so we decided we were going to do something about it and develop something. And we were really lucky because we managed to get some sort of design digital funding from Catalyst, which enabled us to do some user research and some prototyping and some testing that then led to the development of our Going Green Together website, from which many of the climate confident resources have been developed, or we've purposefully allowed them to copy us. It's been a pleasurable plagiarism, I think is the word I would like to use, because we're really passionate about supporting the sector in the Northeast, but obviously we want to help and support sector organisations right across the country. And so if SCVO and their partners are able to build upon the work that we've done to enable them to move further and faster, then we're completely on board with that. So I think well, the main things that we learned from the research that we did was that organisations want to learn more about the science, but get overwhelmed because there's so much out there, that they wanted to take action, but they didn't know where to start. And they wanted to feel like they were part of something bigger, that they weren't just doing it on their own. And it was those three things that we really wanted to respond to in terms of the Going Green Together website that we built. So there's a learn section, there's an act section, there's a share section where organisations can do what you've just done and give little mini case studies of actions that they've taken to inspire and inform others of things that they could do. But beyond just the website as well, in terms of creating that community, we started doing monthly regular sort of drop-in events where people who were using the website or thinking about using the website could just come together really informally for an hour and talk about what they've been doing, any challenges or any successes, and that really helped with sort of building momentum behind the programme. And I think what's been really good is that the initiative in Scotland has been able not only to use some of the resources and content that we developed, but on the back of the research that we'd done as well in terms of what organisations wanted and needed. The other thing that we found that was really interesting was that organisations, mainstream voluntary sector organisations, so not environmental ones, were really clear that they felt they had to get their own houses in order before they could start doing work with their beneficiaries around climate action or campaigning and lobbying about the topic. And I think partly that was to do with confidence, but also they felt that if they went through that process themselves, they would have the learning and the knowledge and the understanding that they could then share with beneficiaries or use as the basis for sort of lobbying and advocacy work. So that was really good. And what we've done since launching our website, which was back in September 21, we've now received funding to do a sort of next stage of the work. So we've developed more resources for our website. We're doing more sort of briefing training events for organisations, including carbon literacy training. And then we've built a sort of year-long programme of support for organisations utilising investors in the environment framework and Smart Carbon, which is a carbon footprinting tool to really enable organisations to thoroughly and strategically embed environmental sustainability in their work. So it's all about developing sustainable transport policies, waste and resource management, champions and leadership within your organisation, all sorts of different things. And it really is about embedding those things, kind of, becoming business as usual sort of approach. And then the third part of our stage 2 of Going Green Together is about awarding project development funds. So we've made 14 grants available to organisations to work with their beneficiaries and to develop partnerships to enable them to do climate action projects for the first time. And that was very much in response to organisations saying to us, we'd love to do some work in this space, but we don't have the time or the capacity to do that sort of co-design, co-development work with our beneficiaries and to build those partnerships. So what we're trying to test is if you provide a small amount of funding up front for project development, does that then create much better project proposals that are much more likely to get funded for the sort of delivery of the projects? And that the Going Green Together stage 2 has been underway for just under a year now. So we haven't got all the learning, but we do have some. And I suppose the things that are most pertinent is that for a lot of organisations, this is still a low priority, or it competes with other priorities that they're dealing with in terms of, just their day-to-day demands, staff capacity, all of those issues. And that we're yet to see the tipping point with funders and commissioners insisting that organisations are proactively doing work around environmental sustainability, but we are beginning to see that shifting. So therefore, making the case for organisations to start taking climate action has been the biggest challenge, really. But we're definitely seeing a shift as more organisations are getting involved. They're encouraging and advocating for others to do so. And the fact that we now, and this programme now exists in the Northeast, we're seeing more funders saying, well, you should be doing this, you should be taking up this opportunity. And we like to, we would give preference to organisations that are doing work around environmental sustainability. So it's a bit of chicken and egg. We're really pleased to have supported this initiative in Scotland. Just after this meeting, I am meeting with a number of local and national infrastructure organisations in England who are talking about replicating or scaling up the Going Green Together resource for England nationally. So this is really timely, but it also means that I can't stay because that meeting's starting in 3 minutes. But I just wanted to wish you all great success, and I really look forward to hearing about how it goes from this point on. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thanks, Carol. Hi everyone, I'm Rachel, I'm from SCVO and I've been involved in working on our website. Carol's gone too quickly for me to say we were really grateful to have such a good starting point from what they gave us. I think we really got that sense of community and encouragement and trying to make this something that felt possible, not impossible. What I'm going to do now is just give you a bit of a demo. So I'm pleased to see that this will be a first time for a lot of you. So that's good. Normally we obviously want people to have seen our resource, but for today it's great that I can show it to you with fresh eyes. Bear with me a sec while I just share my screen. So here we are. This is the Growing Climate Confidence website. So this is where you'll land if you come and visit our website. Just to tell you a little bit about its development. So obviously we had the kind of inspiration from Going Greener Together. We also did some really extensive user testing. Some of you here may have been some of the people who gave us feedback, which was fantastic. We had over 90 individual pieces of feedback, which gave us a bit of a busy week, but really helped us to make sure that it fitted what people wanted and needed and expected. So, you know, we hope we've got quite a way there. We're definitely very open to more feedback and interaction, because this is for the sector. It needs to work for the sector and be the right thing, and we're always keen to keep developing it to make it that. So you'll land here, you'll see a little bit of a preview of what you can find throughout the website. I'll talk you through them in a second. You'll see a bit more about all of our different partners that James mentioned at the beginning as well. Then a bit of information just about this project and what it is. So a nice introductory video from our lovely Beth. You can go and give that a watch afterwards. A bit of the context as well. I mean, I think that we probably all know a bit of the why, the urgency with the need to take action, but also to place it in the context of some of the other issues that the charity sector and voluntary sector face, that we know that this is, you know, a difficult one to get to the top of the agenda sometimes, and we want to make sure that we've helped you do that. We talk a bit about what the sector told us they wanted and how we've responded, and again a bit more about our partners, with also some help from Adam from Small 99, who you'll hear from. At the bottom of every page you'll see these thumbs up, thumbs down buttons, so that's a really great way for us to get a snapshot of how you're finding the website. Please use them. Thumbs up are obviously great, but you know, thumbs down are helpful too, and you'll be given a chance to give a bit more feedback if you do leave one of those bits of feedback there. Like Going Greener Together, we've got a section on learning. Now, this isn't a comprehensive set of resources. This is a starting point. This is some stuff for you to browse if you're interested and want to learn more. Of course, we start with David Attenborough. Who else would we start with? But we've gathered together some resources that we thought looked useful, that covered a range of different areas, that might give some different kind of views and perspectives. There's things like e-learning courses. We've got stuff around race and climate as well. It's a really important angle to consider. Carbon literacy. We're really keen to hear about other great stuff that we should feature here as well. So whether that's something that you've done, something you've seen, please do tell us. We'll stick it up there and be really pleased to do so. Hope I'm not making you all too dizzy with my scrolling. Next, I guess, is the kind of one of the main parts of what we wanted this website to do, which was to give you all some ways to act. We want, you know, we know that this is complicated and that it's difficult to know where to start. You might have started and then got stuck. You might have done lots, but still need some inspiration for the next step. And I guess that's what we wanted to do, is to kind of break it down into different areas, to give you some ideas of things that you can do. So I'll give you some examples. So if we look in energy and buildings, we've got some content around, you know, doing an energy audit. So some kind of steps, and then some signposts to other places where you can get more in-depth information. We look at things like, you know, our staff and volunteers working from home. We know that's something that's come up a lot. Then you can dive straight into the next section. So food, a good one to think about in the afternoon. We've thought about things like events, about sourcing food, about sharing leftover food, giving you again some places to go. So what we're trying to do is always make sure that we give you a snapshot and then some more in-depth resources that you can find. So, you know, please do feel free to have a look through, pick the ones that look helpful to you. I'm not expecting everyone to have done all of these, although if you have, that's fantastic. Please come and tell us all about it so we can feature you with a big gold star. But yeah, do have a look through, find the ones that are likely to work for you, your setting and your organisation. Another bit that feels really key is this section on stories. We really want this to feel like a kind of community-owned piece of work. We know there is so much great stuff happening. We know that some of you will be facing the same challenges, same stumbling blocks, loads of learning as well. So we kind of want to create some space to share that for you, to tell us about the great stuff you've done, the tricky things you've done, about your victories, about your not so victorious bits of work. So we've got these kind of really quick snapshots of bits of work that people have done, some lovely stuff in there. I recommend giving it a read. We've also got some longer form blogs. So we've got one on circular economy from Sarah, who I think I saw join a minute ago, Trust in the Park, talking about active travel, Radio City Association, who are some of our more recent blogs. And a next step in development of the site is just looking at how we lay them out and feature them and keep them coming as well. So if you do have a story that you'd like to tell, give us a shout. We'd love to hear from you. We also wanted to put in some stuff about funding. We know that that's really vital to being able to take any action. What we've done is used Funding Scotland, our funding database, and given you a kind of cut of it that looks at relevant funds and funders. You can filter by activities, areas, the types of funding, etc. So if you're looking for funding, great place to start and have a good look around. And then we've also featured lots of the other organisations who can help too, or have got things of interest. So, you know, there's loads here, loads of next steps. Could keep you busy for several days, but obviously jump in as and when you've got a question or an organisation that you want to find out more about. And finally, to take us to our scorecard, certainly not least. We've developed our scorecard with Small 99, who you hear from later, to really give you a tool that can give you a snapshot and an overview of where your organisation is. So you might be the one who's really keen in your organisation and you want a way to take something to your board, your chief exec, to say, look, you know, we're doing okay in these areas, but we've got other places where we need to do more. You might just be really curious about your starting point so that you can measure again in 6 months and see what progress you've made. There's lots of different reasons to take this scorecard, but what it does is gives you a really quick and easy snapshot of where you are, followed up by a kind of email journey where we'll send you bespoke emails based on what your answers are, where you're needing to do a bit more, even the areas where you're doing really well. We'll follow up with some ideas about how to share that, how to build on it. The scorecard is genuinely really quick and easy to do. It's a great way to get that overview. We ask for your details to start off. It's completely free though, so you stick in your details, and in the words of Blue Peter, here's one I've prepared earlier. So one that I've started just to give you an idea of some of the questions. You track and monitor your business mileage. Let's say yes, we do. Don't have a no-fly policy. Do you ask staff and volunteers to use public transport where possible? You can see at the bottom here the completion levels, and you can see that you're making your way through that. We'd say beforehand, you know, if you're, depending on your role, you might have access to different bits of information. So maybe do just gather a little bit of information about, you know, your policies and practices as well. Or go and ask someone if you get to a question and you're not sure. But, you know, it's a few quick questions, and then at the end, what you'll do is you'll get your own personalised report card that'll look a bit like this. Might be a bit more orange, a bit more red, a bit more green, depending on your answers. And as I say, we'll follow that up with that email journey afterwards. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a whistle-stop tour. Of course, the real aim is that you go and have a play with it yourself and have a look around, find what you like, find what works for you. I can see that there's quite a few things in the chat. Hopefully that's not everyone saying we can't hear you or we can't see your screen. But yes, I can see people sharing some links. But, you know, do just get in touch if you've got any feedback or any thoughts. Have a look around, find what works for you and your organisation. We'd be really pleased to hear from you. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to pass you over to George from Change Mental Health now to talk us through some climate action. Thank you.
Magic, thanks very much, Rachel. And hello, everyone. I'm George Bellamy, the Director of Operations from Change Mental Health. For those who don't know us, we used to be supported by Scotland. So we're a Scotland-wide organisation that's been supporting people to ensure that they don't face mental illness alone since 1974. Now, I'm here to talk about a little bit kind of what we've done, but more importantly, where we're going on our climate journey. When I joined the organisation 14 months ago, one of the key aspects of my role within operations was looking at how we can be not only more carbon confident, but reduce our carbon footprint as an organisation. I think quite a lot of that stirred from taking part in the carbon literacy training. Both myself and another colleague who works in business development took part with SCVO and Keep Scotland Beautiful. And what the training did was not only, you know, give us the words to articulate how important we as a sector need to start taking the conversation around climate change, but how we can actually bring it into the work that we do, because quite often, or certainly from our perspective, it was, this is a really important agenda, but how do we also link that with our day-to-day work that we do on the ground, supporting people with their mental health. So for us, there's a couple of things that we've started doing. One of the things is that we've looked at our buildings. So you might have noticed, I might have blurred it out, but I'm in a brand new building. We've just moved national office. So the office that we're in, we did a carbon calculator assessment on our building, and we were looking at changing our lease. Anyway, we're up to that point. And one of the considerations that we had was, how do we actually make sure that the building is sustainable, that it's got we try to be as carbon neutral as possible. How do we make sure that the building where people are working from is encouraging of other policies and procedures that we're putting in place? So is it somewhere that's got good public access? Is it somewhere where there's it's got cycle routes and all the rest of it? So all of these were part of our considerations as part of our move to national office, to make sure that people are in a space that is both supporting our green agenda, but is also giving people the tools, resources, the opportunity to actually cycle to work, or get the bus, or the new trams that are now in lease, to make sure that they're utilising those, because we wanted to do a bit more than just add our agile work and cycle to work schemes, to actually put it into practice. One of the bigger things, though, that we're starting to do, which is very exciting, is we've just launched, or about to launch, our first social enterprise cafe, and we're a partner with the Edinburgh Chamber of Commerce, who are also doing a Journey to Net Zero program with SMEs and the third sector. So we're working in partnership with them to make sure, how do we launch a new net zero cafe, which is both obviously going to support us in our income generation for the organisation, but is a space and a place for people that's got those credentials, and is really at the forefront of how we kind of operate as an organisation. We've started to introduce a new green team, so they're going to start implementing some changes in all of our buildings. We've got 14 buildings across Scotland, and some of those will be simple things, encouraging teams to work agile and remotely where they can, utilise our cycle to work scheme. But some of the bigger picture and infrastructure over the next 5 to 10 years, which will be, are our buildings actually fit for purpose moving forward? Do we actually need a building in those areas? Is this somewhere that we can work in community settings, such as put our community link workers in GP practices, for instance, and actually change the way that we work and the way that we offer and deliver services, and not just change the buildings in which we deliver them from, but actually make sure that they are community focused, are built within communities, and are having both the benefit for the service that we deliver, but also for our environmental footprint as well. But one of the main things, I suppose, out with that, organisations such as ours are looking at, how do we actually bring our skill set to this to the fore, to start talking about climate change. And we know that particularly with climate anxiety, that we're seeing climate anxiety on the rise. I think it was in March that the Woodland Trust and a YouGov poll put out that particularly within young people, 1 in 3 young people across Britain are scared, 33%, sad, 34%, or pessimistic, 34%, about climate change, with a further 28% of young people stating that they feel overwhelmed with how they can contribute or be a part of changes that will make a real difference to the place and society that they live in, with around carbon. So we're developing internally some training. We have a mental health first aid course, and we're developing a program in-house, trialing first, and this is something that will be available to other organisations and partners, around how do we actually tackle climate anxiety, how do we bring our skill set of over 50 years of working in the mental health space to deliver something which really brings to the fore the carbon literacy element, in terms of what is it, where are we, how can we make a difference, how can we manage our own well-being and that of others, and how can we make manageable micro changes that actually have a bigger impact cumulatively. So we're developing that in-house at the moment. We're very excited about launching this potential new project. We've got lots of partners. We work with Mental Health UK as one of our as a founding charity member, and we've got partnerships with schools across Scotland delivering our Bloom and Your Resilience programme. So this is something that definitely will tie in as a resource. So I suppose for us, it's looking at, in terms of people, systems and processes, how do we work more agile, encourage people to use the spaces and places in a better, more sustainable way. Launching a new carbon calculator. This is something that we did with our previous office and something that we'll be looking for all of our buildings across Scotland. Encouraging staff to be part of this green team to identify things that they can do in their office space and where they work, but also in their own lives. And I suppose more importantly is bringing our expertise of being in the mental health space to develop this new training package, which we're hoping to launch at the tail end of this year. So those are some of the things that we're starting to do. I suppose, like many people, hopefully on this call, hopefully I'm not alone in this, and sometimes it can feel quite overwhelming in terms of how do we actually manage, delivering our services whilst also implementing these changes. But in small ways and large, we can do it from the systems and processes that we do or the expertise that we have. And we're really excited that actually as a sector there is now a space with dedicated resources that we can go to see how we can bring those in to actually help us on this journey. So great to be a part of this. Hopefully there's a couple of bits that people can take away, but I'll pop my email in the chat if anyone wants to have a conversation offline. But otherwise, I will pass back to Rachel, I think.
I can pick it up, Rachel. That's okay. I think you weren't expecting that. So I'm going to hand over to Alison in a second from Volunteer Centre East Lothian. But before I do, it's quite hot. I was just going to encourage everybody, if your camera's off, you might be doing this already. But if not, have a wee stretch, have a wee wiggle round about. I know it's super hot. I can see people in the cameras beginning to wilt a little bit. So bear with us. Have a wee move around if you need to. And I'm delighted to hand over to Alison Brown from Volunteer Centre East Lothian to talk about the work that they've been doing.
Hi, thank you so much for that introduction. Hopefully you can see and hear me. I've got the window open. Unfortunately, I'm on a very busy high street. So please let me know when I'll run and close the window if I have to, but then I might keel over. So hopefully you can also see my screen as well. If someone can nod and make me feel reassured. Brilliant, thank you. So I got invited along today to speak about a particular project that I was involved with. So I'm from Volunteer Centre East Lothian, so we're the local TSI that covers the East Lothian area. My job is a locality partner, so I work with charities and groups, and they cover our huge range of different activities. So mental health and wellbeing, poverty, climate, art, heritage, everything. So I'm really excited about the launch of this new website, which I think will be a really great resource for loads of people. But in terms of the project, so I guess we saw a bit of an opportunity. So Scottish Communities Climate Action Network had Pockets and Prospects Fund, and I thought we would give it a shot and see if we could get our hands on a little bit of the money. So what we wanted to do was link up with some of the other networks already operating in the area. So Volunteer Centre East Lothian is a member of both the East Lothian Climate Action Network, but also the Friendly Food Network. So we wanted to work alongside those groups already working in the area. So basically the funding was available from kind of autumn last year. And that time we were seeing a cost of living crisis. We were seeing both a massive hike in energy prices, but also a lot of anxiety around that. A lot of people that we were seeing coming into our front-facing office here were very anxious about what the winter was going to lead to and what was ahead for them. And a lot of people were telling us that they already felt that they had that very stark choice between eating and heating. So yeah, sorry, I should probably put into context that we have a food pantry provision as well in our office here. So it's very much emergency food provision. So we can do 1 day's amount of food for a family and then also do a food bank referral. So I guess we're very much, yeah, front facing and seeing the issues that some of the people who are, on low incomes and have just, sort of multiple disadvantages. We're very much in the front face there. So we kind of saw this as a wee bit of an opportunity. SCAN had this Pockets and Prospects Fund, which was to help engage disadvantaged groups in the community and to work with them to tackle climate disruption. So when I looked at that, I thought, well, we definitely have the disadvantaged groups, you know, and I can definitely see how it's very low down the agenda for a lot of people. You know, it always stuck with me when I heard the Green councillor speaking to some of the local families, and she said, when she was doorstepping, the people were saying it wasn't that they didn't care and weren't interested, it was just so low down their list of things that affected their day-to-day life that actually it just, you know, it just kind of fell off the radar a little bit for them. So we had a bit of a discussion in the office about what we could do, and we wanted it to be something really practical. So sorry, that was probably excessively loud. We put in an application to see whether we could get some money for some simple energy saving pieces of kit. So some LED light bulbs, some hot water bottles, and some other energy saving items. But we also wanted to have sort of an education leaflet that went alongside these items. And also sort of trying to make that really clear link for people that, you know, the energy saving, you know, if they save energy, they save money, but also, you know, the realities of how that links into the climate change agenda. And, you know, they would also be playing their part in reducing their carbon footprint. So what did we do? Well, in the end, we purchased 164 hot water bottles, 50 LED light bulbs, and 5 hot water flasks. So what we were finding, we have a community first project that sits alongside us here in the TSI, and they work alongside older people who are socially isolated and often not leaving their houses. So what we were finding was that they were boiling the kettle, or their carer was coming in and boiling the kettle once a day, and then that was it. So they would try and sit with hot water beside them all day, but or they would just end up having cold drinks. So giving them a flask that they could then easily access throughout the day meant they had a source of hot water to keep them warm while they were sitting in a house where they decided not to turn on the heating. So yeah, so it was very stark for us, you know, when we heard individual stories about actually the real challenges around, you know, people choosing not to turn on the heating during what thankfully turned out to be a relatively mild winter in the most part. So to deliver on these as well, we didn't just deliver from our own pantry. As I said at the start, we linked in with the Friendly Food Network. So that's a network of all the food pantries, lunch clubs, the food bank here as well. So that was kind of our distributing network. So that works out really well. It meant that we actually had pretty good geographical spread across East Lothian. And as I said, we also worked with the East Lothian Climate Action Network, and that was to try and make a leaflet that got that balance right. And just started to highlight some of the climate change issues. This is the front cover of our leaflet. So actually it's really straightforward. You'll be glad to hear I printed it in black and white, eco-saving, obviously too, although it did look much nicer in colour. So it was, as I say, I mean, that front page, it's meant to just, you know, really highlight to people actually, you know, your contribution is quite big, you know, and actually the emissions that come from heating our own homes is significant, and how that links into climate change. Although, of course, then it becomes a slightly double-edged sword, because people weren't choosing to not heat their homes. They felt they had no choice but to not heat their homes, which is one of the challenges, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a second. These are a couple of photos that we took when we were distributing some of the hot water bottles. So initially we spent some money, we held some back, and then to see what was most popular, and it was very much the hot water bottles were what people were asking for. And actually, if anyone else was trying to buy them last winter, they were quite hard to source. So I think we were lucky, we were a bit ahead of the game there. So the image there is from our Kindness Cafe, so that we have that once a month. That's for people who are socially isolated in Trinent area. And they were all gifted a hot water bottle. And then the other photo is of someone who accesses our food pantry, who also received a hot water bottle and an LED light bulb as well. Yep, so what worked well, I mean, we did get some lovely feedback. So, I mean, that quote kind of stands on its own. So people really welcomed having a very straightforward item, and actually particularly younger families, we found people didn't actually have hot water bottles. I think it was probably a little bit of an old-fashioned kind of tool that people used. And certainly, you know, then they would come back and tell you how cozy it made them and how cozy it made their kids. So it felt like that was a real positive there, that was an energy-saving item that was providing a really instant benefit for people. As I say, holding back some of the original money works well as well, so that actually we were finding out people didn't really want LED light bulbs, or they weren't really sure if they were compatible, and it was very obvious that hot water bulbs were really the key item people wanted. The partnership working aspects of it was really successful, and we were really well supported with that, so that was great, and it felt like it was the right item at the right time for folk. So I'd say we were quite quick off the mark and seemed to get loads of hot water bottles, because I think other areas had a challenge getting those. So yeah, I guess for me, the real challenge was actually still getting the climate change message out. People were easier to engage talking about energy efficiency, and obviously the two are very much related, but actually finding the way of talking to people about climate change and the kind of the dangers of being either condescending or not quite using the language that was that accessible for folks still felt like a massive challenge. So maybe I should have done some more carbon literacy training before I started, but also because we were using our networks and filtering things out, and that was then a combination of volunteers and employed members of staff who were gifting the items. I guess we kind of lost a little bit of control around that. So where it was in our own kindness cafe, we could have those conversations and facilitate that. But actually, you know, once it was out the building, I'm not really sure, you know, we did lose that aspect of control around that. So it might be even that volunteers didn't feel comfortable having any kind of conversation. So yeah, so probably that kind of working out the communication bit could have been done better, but it did feel like it kind of highlighted, you know, that actually there was this, I guess, a caring side to the climate agenda. Sometimes, you know, there's obviously things in the press, there can be a little bit of a middle class bias, or it can be seen as a disruptive kind of element, whereas this was hopefully a caring side to engage people. So it was certainly well worth doing, but and for us, you know, it wasn't really our core business, so I guess we could have maybe reached out to get some of that communication tightened up. But again, if you want to ask me any questions about it, really happy to answer those, and thanks for having me along.
Great, thanks very much, Alison. So we're going to do a little section now on kind of funding and support that's available. So Katrina's going to talk to us about the funders collectively, and then I'll talk a wee bit about some of the support. When it gets to me, I'm going to ask you if you've got any examples of funding that you have accessed, so you can start thinking about that, and we'll get some examples popped in the chat, so have that in the back of your mind. So hand over to Katrina first of all.
Thanks, Beth, and hello again. I did promise I would be back. If you didn't catch it before, my name is Katrina, and I work for a funding and support organisation called Inspiring Scotland. For those of you who don't know Inspiring Scotland, we currently fund around 500 charities and community groups across Scotland, working with partners in the public, private and third sector. We particularly focus on striving for a Scotland without poverty or disadvantage, and my role within that is as a fund manager, working on our community-focused funding programmes around creativity, wellbeing, and particularly rural communities leading change. However, as an organisation, we've also been exploring ourselves how the climate crisis impacts our work, the way in which we work, and the communities that we support as a funder. We're a member of the Environmental Funders Network, and we're a signatory on the Funders Commitment on Climate Change, which I recommend you take a look at because it lists loads of different funders that are committed to working in this way. As James mentioned earlier, together with other members of the Scottish Funders Forum, we've been working with SCVO and other partners, amazing partners involved in delivering this work to support the development of the Growing Climate Confidence tool. And that's involved kind of sharing our pooled experience as funders, working with charities in lots of different contexts and settings, delivering lots of different types of services in lots of different locations around Scotland, with the idea of trying to make it as useful as possible to the organisations that we support. There's loads of reasons why we think that the Growing Climate Confidence tool is and the scorecard are so important. We really think it's a fantastic resource and a fantastic opportunity for Scotland's third sector to prepare for the climate impacts that are already here and that are still to come, adapting both how they deliver their services and also where they work in order to be more resilient in a changing future. We're also hearing from charities already, the ones that we work with, about how changes in our climate and the kind of social and economic and legislative changes that have kind of gone around our drive to reduce our emissions have started to affect some of the most vulnerable people and communities in Scotland. And as an example, I kind of realized that earlier I was kind of quite lightheartedly suggesting that you should remember to wear some sunscreen if you're in a sunny spot today. But historically, although we've celebrated any and all sunny days in Scotland, the reality is that kind of prolonged heat and heat waves are particularly dangerous for many of the vulnerable groups that our charities support, including infants and young people, older people, those with chronic health conditions. And we all have a responsibility in what we do and how we work to limit the extent of climate change through reducing emissions, through adapting to these new conditions, and the kind of warmer, wetter and wilder weather to come. And so perhaps finally, connected to what's come up today, we're also hearing from charities and communities about their real desire to reach net zero, how exciting a challenge it is, how excited they are and how important it is to make sure that that is a just transition to a net zero society, that the Scotland third sector really wants to lead on climate action and really wants to invest in that sustainable future for not only their organisation, but also for the world at large. And so in feeding into this resource as a kind of funder, we're also taking on the action of exploring how it can feed back into funding in the future. So how this becomes a kind of a feedback loop as much as possible. And we really hope that the resource and the insights from the scorecard in particular can help funders like ourselves and others to identify future or emerging areas of funding need and better direct support for climate action projects. So like, for example, as Carol mentioned earlier, it's still quite rare for funders to have kind of climate action requirements as part of their grant applications, but it is something that I'm seeing more and more across the wider funding landscape. And what is more common, I think, at the moment is funders using insights to design specific funding programs to support climate action, particularly at the moment around energy efficiency, as Alison mentioned earlier, a generation of energy, decarbonising heat, and also things like sustainable transport, incentivising public transport, cycle to work, that kind of things. So that's all to say that's why there's a big section on the Growing Climate Confidence resource around funding and support. So I'm going to pass over to Beth to tell us a little bit more about it.
Great, thank you, Katrina. And just to kind of re-emphasise that point on the scorecard, I guess, so the benefit, hopefully, for organisations of using the scorecard is this really quick, idea about where to put their efforts in terms of net zero against the kind of 5 big categories. The real advantage behind the scenes for us, SCVO, the funders and the other infrastructure bodies, I know quite a few of you are on the call, is if we can get a good critical mass in terms of the number of organisations completing that, it will give us some really useful data about where some of those gaps are and allow us to then either the funders to think about, as Katrina said, developing new funding programmes if that's what's required, or for those of us sort of on the infrastructure support side to use our voice to collectively influence and say, look, we can see that 20% of the organisations that have completed this don't have a cycle to work scheme. Why is that? We can interrogate the data a bit more. So it'd be really great for us to get a large number of organisations filling that in to give us some quite robust data that can then be used in the coming years to help design some of those programmes. I was just going to talk quickly, so I'm not going to share my screen, but just briefly to talk about the kind of some of the key networks and funds that are available. But as I said, it would be great if, while I'm talking, if you're an organisation that has got funding or got support in order to either do a net zero project or a climate action project, feel free to pop it in the chat right now. We'll build up a list of the, who's on the call and what support they've already got, and we can make those links between one another as well. But just to run through, this is not an exhaustive list. Funding Scotland is a database to search if you're looking for really specific funding sources, but some of the big things that are worth knowing about. The first one is if you're looking for support at a local level, the Third Sector Interface Network, quite a few of them are on the call today. Loads of them are offering really specific support. So Bob's put a few things in the chat from GCVS. They've got 2 members of staff that are specifically there to support around, climate action, net zero buildings. and a number of the other TSIs have something similar. So if you're based in one locality, in one council area, get in touch with your third sector interface. Lots of them have got really bespoke services and can help you. And the Scottish Government are also funding a new network of climate action hubs. So the first 2 of them are up and running and funded already, Highlands and Islands, and in the northeast of Scotland, Nescan. But there's about £5 million going into them over the coming year. They'll be based in different geographical areas, and the aim of them is to galvanise people at a local level around climate action. Most of them will have a bit of funding available. They'll also have lots of expert advice on seeking funding, finding funding, using your voice collectively, advocating for better public transport, all of those kind of things, and they'll focus on whatever's relevant in that local area. So the one in the northeast has got just transition as a big area because of the oil and gas industry up there, for example. So that's all coming into place. Scottish Government's putting a fair bit of money behind it, and lots of really great people are involved in those climate hubs. So there's links to all of this on the Climate Confident website. Adaptation Scotland, I think Aoife's on the call. Their focus is around adaptation. So what do we do because the climate is changing, not just about changing our behaviours because of, in order to reduce our emissions, but actually how do we respond to the changing environment? They've got a really, really lovely resource that just came out a few months ago, which is the Adaptation Toolkit for Communities, which again has got loads of great stuff about flooding resilience, ideas about funding, examples of projects. Again, you can find that on the website, and they're happy to talk to any community group, social enterprise that's interested. In terms of active travel, some of the big partners, big third sector partners, Paths for All, have got money for kind of walking projects, improving path networks in your local area. Cycling Scotland, lots of money for cycling programmes, bike maintenance, all of that kind of thing. Community Transport Scotland, I think David's on the call. They've got specific work around if you run a community transport service, decarbonising, the bus that you use, using cargo bikes. They've got both advice on that, and there's a big fund that just reopened a couple of weeks ago that will fund the full costs of an electric vehicle for a community transport service. So if you're running community transport, have a look at them, and the signposting links off from there. Community Energy Scotland, again, if you're thinking about renewable energy in your local area, they're the real experts. They can help with lots of advice, turbines and all that kind of stuff. And there's a couple of big funds. The Let's Do Net Zero Community Buildings Fund. It can be quite hard to get access to that money. Eligibility can be a wee bit tricky for some organisations, but loads and loads of community buildings in Scotland have got it and are using it to put in heat pumps and do retrofit of community buildings. In terms of the sort of learning and education and training, so lots of these local climate hubs offer carbon literacy training. As George talked about, that was the kind of kickstarter for them to get going in their organisation. Keep Scotland Beautiful, I've got a big programme. We offered some free training with them over the last year that was really well received, and uptake was really high. And there's lots of kind of free courses as well. So some of the ones that Rachel talked about earlier, kind of Future Learn courses and others to do carbon literacy and engagement work. And then the final thing, so as Katrina said, the funder's commitment on climate change. If you have a look on Funding Scotland, any funder that has signed that commitment is flagged up. So you can see if they've already signed it, and you can use that in your applications to say, we know you've committed to climate change, therefore look at our project specially. Lots of the new National Lottery strategy for the next 10 years has got environment absolutely at the heart of it. Foundation Scotland are a big funder that are doing a big focus on lots of different projects that have environmental sustainability at their heart. William Grant Foundation. The Environmental Funders Network that Katrina just mentioned published a report again about a month ago or so, looking at where the funding in Scotland actually goes. So who's funding environmental work and where's their funding going? That's a really good source of information about what has happened over the last few years. And again, that will be a tool to help sort of influence future funding programmes. And they run a network for environmental fundraisers. So if you're looking for funding and class yourself as a fundraiser, the Environmental Funders Forum Fundraisers Network is a great place to get peer support and advice from others. That's a huge run through lots and lots of things. We'll pop some of this into the email that comes out after the event today. And as I say, it's all also available on the website. And I hope that things have been coming into the chat there, just having a look. Yeah, there's bits and pieces. So keep going. If you've got access to funding, please do pop it in the chat. It would be lovely to hear about what you've got. I know it's getting very, very hot. I'm very conscious of that. So thanks for sticking with us. I'm going to hand over to Adam now, who's going to do a bit more of the kind of technical net zero chat for those that's relevant for.
Thank you very much. Yeah, love to meet you all. Really good to kind of be here and hear what's going on across the sector. Just to give a bit of kind of paint the picture of my background and where I got involved. So my name is Adam Bastock, founder of Small 99. We really focus on smaller businesses and how to get them to net zero. So we focus on, micro enterprises of up to about 20 people, of how do we make climate action really simple for those organizations to get started. And it's been great to collaborate with SCVO and kind of the greater growing climate confident website to see this come together and become that really good resource. That kind of scorecard approach was really, how do we identify the action areas without having the requirement for organizations to measure their full footprint? So please do use the scorecard, because I think it's a really valuable resource to get a quick idea of where your your climate action should be focused in that sense. What I wanted to do now is just really open it up to the floor and ask any questions, or ask for any questions from you guys that you might have around either net zero, the kind of wider policy frameworks, kind of the difference between net zero, carbon neutral, carbon offsets. Happy to be put on the spot and really challenged on anything you'd like to know. So is there anyone that's got a question immediately that'd like to come off mute and ask me, or feel free to put it in the chat and I'll come to it. And I'll give you a few seconds or so to think about that and get typing on those. If not, I will be diving into the carbon neutral versus net zero definitions.
I wonder if everyone's ended up in a paddling pool in their back garden.
I was going to say, everyone's just in a small pool at the bottom.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about the difference between the carbon neutral and the net zero, because I don't really know anything about it, but yeah.
Nice, that's great shout. I've got some slides prepared earlier, as I think the second Blue Peter reference can come out. So I'm just going to share my screen quickly, which I think I can do. It's going to be easier to demonstrate it very briefly. So with carbon neutral, which is quite a common term, it's a bit older than net zero in terms of its adaptation, kind of within the language. The idea would be that if you've got this 100 ton of emissions, so let's say you measure your organizational footprint and you've got 100 tons of emissions, you would then purchase about 100 tons of offsets to then neutralize that. Sometimes carbon neutrality can only include carbon dioxide as well, bearing in mind there are 5 or 6 different greenhouse gases. So you've got methane, nitrous oxide, and then fluorinated gases, which make up kind of the rest of that. I won't go into the reasons why or the differences between them, but carbon neutrality as a status can sometimes only relate to that carbon dioxide. The main thing with carbon neutral and net zero is that carbon neutral does not require reduction. You can achieve it through offsetting only. And that is by purchasing those offsets. As I say, if you have 100 tons as a measured footprint, you would then purchase 100 tons of credits. Those credits, and I think James popped into the chat, can be sort of politically charged as a topic at the minute. There are very good certified credits out there that are again, I won't go into the detail of this, but there are different ways that you can offset your footprint. Some of those are accredited, some of them are not accredited. That doesn't mean that the non-accredited ones are bad, and nor does it mean that the accredited ones are always good. So carbon offsets can be quite a tricky element, which is where carbon neutral status has come under a little bit of pressure. The way I tend to think of it is it's a little bit like throwing money at the problem, in that if you need to get on your journey quite rapidly and do some good, you can achieve that. And it is certified through a accreditation such as PAS 2060. In terms of net zero, where the difference really comes in is that, one, it always includes all gases. So it includes methane as well as nitrous oxide, as well as the F gases. So it always goes beyond just carbon dioxide. The main thing is that action is key, in that if you measure your baseline year and you measure your carbon footprint as that baseline year, this in 2019 is 100 tons of CO2, 100 tons as a carbon footprint beyond just CO2. In order to achieve net zero status, you would need to reduce your emissions down by that 90% and therefore remain with just 10 tons, and then you can offset those remaining 10 tons. We've not got the accreditation yet with net zero. It's coming. The ISO standards are being worked on for this, and in the next two years-ish, if not sooner, I would expect a more formal accreditation for net zero to start to come through. But really the main thing is that it does tend to go beyond just those kind of areas of, it includes everything your business does. So the footprint is also quite wide ranging in terms of the different scopes of your organization that it's looking at. But really the difference is that in order to be net zero, you need to start taking these demonstrated reduction actions, some of which we saw earlier. I was trying to get the Mentimeter and capture some of those, but I wasn't moving quick enough. But I think this is the key thing. Carbon neutrality is a great stepping stone. Net zero really is the destination to reduce your footprint down to zero. We're now also starting to see other elements come through, such as like kind of biodiversity metrics and circular economy and things like that as well, where we're starting to move beyond that net zero definition. Does that answer your question? Is that making sense to you? Perfect. I've got a thumbs up, which was a nice result. I see organizations being B certified. Can you explain what this means? Yes, Sarah, thanks for that. So B Corp, as it's called, is kind of that B certification. B Corp is an independent organization that it kind of accredits businesses based on 5 areas, which I believe are, and don't hold me to this, but I think it's social, environmental, governance, customers, and something else. So it's quite wide ranging. It does include parts of kind of net zero commitments within that environmental standard, but it doesn't always. So you're scored across a wide range of kind of metrics. You need to score at least 80 points in order to become a B Corp. That then allows you to kind of be part of that organization. And it's a great system. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for smaller organizations because it is so challenging and isn't necessarily set up for that. But it is a really good process to go through to start understanding what actions you've taken and what you've not taken. But it is very different to net zero. You could be a B Corp organization and not have net zero commitments, as an example. So there are kind of differences and challenges there. Hopefully that makes sense, Sarah. If not, I can dig into more details there on that, because B Corp's it's a big one. Sandy, are we likely to see a move away from carbon neutral and offsets? I would say we already are. I think it's been really interesting being in the space over the past 2 years. I think 2 years ago, offsets were really kind of hot and people were setting up quite a lot of platforms and trading initiatives for them. We've seen those fall a little bit out of favor and the shift really move towards the action element, because that's not to say that offsets are bad and that we're going to need them, but I think there has been a lot of companies who haven't been as ambitious as they could have been with this. And therefore there is a greater requirement for that reduction element and demonstrating that transparently, which is kind of sort of the key. I would emphasize that carbon neutral isn't bad. It's not a bad status. Sometimes I can talk about it and it sounds quite negative, but it is one of those things that is a stepping stone, in that the benefit is within a year, you might be able to get carbon neutral status very rapidly and then move towards net zero as the next phase of that. The challenge is if you're stopping at carbon neutral, that does become slightly more of an issue with that. And the reason why carbon offsets, to answer James's kind of question earlier on around that politically sensitive element, is because there's been enough schemes now that haven't necessarily come to full fruition, in terms of if you're planting a tree, you can sell that offset on the assumption that tree is going to grow. If that tree doesn't grow, you're going to have a problem there in terms of that carbon offset might not have fully matured. It's a lot more complicated than that, but that's where the kind of challenges are coming from. Are there any other questions? Feel free to come off mute and ask me directly if you want to, if you'd like to. I'm looking around for people on camera, you see, to pick on. But
I've actually got one, Adam.
oh, there you go, Wendy. Thank you, Wendy.
I jumped back on. I realised my meeting hadn't started yet. Yeah, I was watching Panorama last night, and it was about the electric vehicles, and it was saying that really, as a country, we need to be investing much more in infrastructure,
yeah,
and incentivizing climate change. And I just wondered where the leadership was coming from here. You know, the third sector led through the pandemic in terms of a lot of pivoting and initiative and innovation. Is this happening again, or is this more of a collaborative this time?
I think that's a really good point. I think transport typically is one of the barriers where, as an organization, you are going to struggle to decarbonize beyond the obvious. just this morning we had a call with someone who had kind of put in electric bike charging and had like kind of the cycle schemes, but the barrier to adoption there from staff members was they didn't feel safe on the roads. That is a problem that can only really be solved by infrastructure there. And I think that's where that lack of investment has been seen. I think Scotland is quite different to England in that it does seem a little bit further ahead. Active travel seems more baked in. However, you know, I always think there's more budget that could be spent there because the amount that's spent on roads versus active travel is kind of quite different. Electric vehicles are a good one where we do need more electric vehicles. We also need less cars overall. So I think where's the investment going into public transport more broadly to shift away from cars, especially in the central belt? And I realise that I'm not answering the question at all here, Wendy, but these are just kind of my thoughts. In terms of where the leadership coming from, I think it is probably more grassroots, I would say. And I think the big challenge that certainly, or the recommendation I would have to a lot of people is using your voice. And as an organisation, going to the local council and demanding better or requesting better infrastructure and going, actually, we need public transport. We can't decarbonise otherwise. That might fall on deaf ears, but I think it probably won't in 5 years' time because those net zero targets are only going to start biting more and more. And we're going to run out of other kind of alternatives. And electric vehicle charging, you know, it has been too slow. The rollout's been too slow. There are, however, it's one of the few areas there are kind of nationwide grants available for installation of those. So I think transport's a really difficult topic, and it's one that is quite exciting, and I can go on it for hours, and will do. So I'll pause there. Yes, Neil.
Hi, afternoon, Adam. Thanks very much. I suppose Scotland has set net zero targets of 90% by 2040. So as a sector, rather than individual organisations, so we've got a bike reuse project, and there's a lot of other reuse, repair and recycling organisations, community woodlands. So I think there's quite a few organisations and sectors within the third sector that are that I suppose the rest of the sector. So if you run a community centre, or you've got thinking like the guys up in Oban that run a swimming pool, where you've got quite a significant carbon footprint, you could potentially offset within the sector, if that makes sense. And I'm just wondering if there's been any work done on that type of thing.
Question, to my knowledge, not particularly. Looking to Beth here to see if I'm incorrect on that, but no, I think it's a really interesting point because especially in Scotland, there's a huge amount of rewilding that's going on, and this is a really good example of where offsetting does fall over a little bit. In that a lot of rewilding projects, if you look at Trees for Life, for example, they're a great initiative. They can't quantify the amount of carbon they're saving, and therefore they're not an accredited carbon offset because the very nature is you're leaving a piece of land to rewild itself. Therefore, it's unpredictable in what it's doing. Therefore, you can't capture the carbon credits from that and sell them on a kind of accredited system. So it's where it gets complicated. I think it's also where we need to focus on that action element of going, well, biodiversity gain locally is probably a far more important thing to be focusing on than just direct carbon credits and offsets. But I do think there's probably more work to be done there, which I know that's not a particularly helpful answer, but it's probably kind of my honest thoughts on it is that there's a lot of stuff we could do there. I'm happy to pick up on that outside of this call if that's easier, Neil, as well. I'm conscious that there's probably, I've not looked at the chat, so I'm just going to go to Alison.
I think Mark's got his hand up, Adam. The ones in the chat are more to do with one specific question, I think. So.
Okay, cool. Yes, Mark. Sorry, I was on the wrong screen on my Zoom, so I didn't see the hand.
So a couple of questions I had. I was curious to know, I know you said you work typically with small businesses. I was wondering what the most common sort of rapid changes that businesses are able to make in terms of how they strive in this space. And I guess the other thing I was curious about, I noticed in your slides there that Vaslan and South Lanarkshire Council feature strongly, so just curious to hear a little bit more about what they're doing in South Lanarkshire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think with the rapid reductions organisations can make, I think there's a few of them. So there's some, the ones that you can directly control in terms of like energy is normally quite big. It's surprising how many businesses are still not using fully LED installations. Like at a domestic level, an LED is not going to make a big impact, but if you're running a small warehouse, for example, or a cafe where the lights are on 12, 16 hours a day, that LED does kind of stack up. You're going to typically see an 80% reduction in bills by swapping that over. Installation of solar panels, again, that can be 50% of your reductions. So really rapidly, you can make quite good inroads in there. And typically what we see is that within the first kind of 3 years of net zero, you can probably make a 50% reduction relatively easily. Getting to 90% is then going to take that next 10 years because you start running out of things that you can control or directly influence, and it just become a bit harder. But also that's where the infrastructure changes are going to really benefit. Transport as well is a big one, in that if you're driving, you know, a kind of petrol Range Rover to work every day, swapping that for an e-bike is about a 99% reduction in the emissions. So if you're doing that with your kind of staff members as well, or even kind of travel policies, flying from Glasgow to London rather than getting the train, again, that's going to have a big impact. There are costs associated sometimes with that, but they do tend to balance out, especially when you start factoring in things like carbon pricing, which in the private sector is starting to come in more so for large organizations. But as it comes in further down the line, we might start seeing that have an impact. In terms of the kind of South Lanarkshire kind of Vasland thing, we're working on a pilot project to start developing this and start testing what does actually that look like, what do the rapid reductions look like as part of taking a small pilot of organizations through a kind of net zero journey as part of this. So those slides were from a call this morning, which I'm sure I can say of kind of going, actually, how do we start demonstrating this? And testing the theory really is like the information is good, but what happens when you put that into the hands of people, and what starts, you know, what changes happen there? No worries, Mark. Conscious of time, happy to keep going. I was looking at Beth for
yeah, I think
support.
That's us, just 5 minutes left, so we'll probably close up Adam's section there, but Adam is always happy to chat about all this stuff. So if there's anything that he said that sparks your interest and you want to find out more, again, we'll share contact details after the call. And Yvonne's here from South Lanarkshire Council. They're funding this specific pilot, which is focused on social enterprises based in South Lanarkshire, where there will be more intensive support around the net zero journey of those organisations. So if that is you, or if you know somebody based in South Lanarkshire who runs a social enterprise, there's still a few spaces on the programme. So again, Yvonne, if it's okay with you, we'll share your email after today and people can get in touch with Yvonne directly about that. So I think that's us sort of drawing to a close. Thank you for sticking with us for the hour and a half in the roasting heat. It's been lovely to have so many of you on the call, and I hope that the range of different things you've heard today have given you a little bit of inspiration for some of the stuff you might want to do in your own organisation. And if you're an infrastructure body, it's given you, you know, a bit of kind of confidence that the climate confidence tools we've developed cover a whole range of different use cases, and we hope that you'll start using them and promoting them in your own work. You heard from Carol at Vaughan that they started off with the kind of website and resources and then developed it into much more community-based support. As I mentioned, the TSI network and the climate action hubs are already community-based support in Scotland. So the next stage for us is working out with those communities of practice and with people like Circular Communities Scotland, Adaptation Scotland, Community Transport Scotland, all of these other sort of specialists in their own areas. How do we as a sector get organisations to the support they need for the specific sort of changes that they want to make? Get in touch with us, tell us what you think, tell us what's not working as well as what is working, and it's been really lovely to have you with us today. Unless any of the other speakers, who I thank very much for their time, have anything else to add, that's us for today. So really appreciate you joining us, and look forward to your feedback on the resources. Thank you so much.